Hi guys, let's start part 2 of chapter 2, that is the nationalist movement in Indo-China. 2.3 Resistance in Schools. Teachers and students did not blindly follow the curriculum. Sometimes there was open opposition, at other times there was silent resistance. As the numbers of Vietnamese teachers increased in the lower classes, it became difficult to control what was actually taught. While teaching, Vietnamese teachers quietly modified the text and criticized what was stated. In 1926, a major protest erupted in the Saigon Native Girls' School. So, in 1928, protest erupted in the Saigon Native Girls' School. A Vietnamese girl sitting in one of the front seats was asked to move to the back of the class and allow a local French student to occupy the front bench. She refused. The principal, also a colon, French people in the colonies, expelled her. When angry students protested, they too were expelled, leading to a further spread of open protest. Seeing the situation getting out of control, the government forced the school to take the students back. The principal reluctantly agreed but warned the students, "I will crush all Vietnamese under my feet." Ah, you wish my deportation. Know well that I will leave only after I am assured Vietnamese no longer inhabit Cochin, China. Elsewhere, students fought against the colonial government's efforts to prevent the Vietnamese from qualifying for white-collar jobs. They were inspired by patriotic feelings and the conviction that it was the duty of the educated to fight for the benefit of the society. This brought them into conflict with the French as well as the traditional elite, since both saw their positions threatened. By the 1920s, students were forming various political parties. By the 1920s, students were forming various political parties, such as the Party of Young Annam, and publishing nationalist journals such as the Ananese Student. Okay, so let's see some important dates. 1802. Nguyen An becomes emperor, symbolizing the unification of the country under the Nguyen dynasty. 1867, Cochin, China, the South becomes a French colony. 1887, creation of the Indo-China Union, including Cochin, China, Annam, Tonkin, Cambodia, and later Laos. 1930, Ho Chi Minh forms the Vietnamese Communist Party. 1945, Viet Minh start a general popular insurrection. Bao Dai abdicates. Ho Chi Minh declares independence in Hanoi, September 23rd. 1954. The French army is defeated at Dien Bien Phu. 1961. Kennedy decides to increase U.S. military aid to South Vietnam. 1974. Paris Peace Treaty. 1975. April 30th. NLF troops enter Saigon. 1976. The Socialist Republic of Vietnam is proclaimed. Schools thus became an important place for political and cultural battles. The French sought to strengthen their rule in Vietnam through the control of education. They tried to change the values, norms, and perceptions of the people to make them believe in the superiority of French civilization and the inferiority of the Vietnamese. Vietnamese intellectuals, on the other hand, feared that Vietnam was losing not just control over its territory but its very identity. So, Vietnamese intellectuals, on the other hand, feared that Vietnam was losing not just control over its territory but its identity. Its own culture and customs were being devalued, and the people were developing a master slave mentality. The battle against French colonial education became part of the larger battle against colonialism and for independence. 3. Hygiene, disease, and everyday resistance. Education was not the only sphere of everyday life in which such political battles against colonialism were fought. In many other institutions, we can see the variety of small ways in which the colonized expressed their anger against the colonizers. 3.1 Plague strikes Hanoi. Take the case of health and hygiene. When the French set about creating a modern Vietnam, they decided to rebuild Hanoi. The latest idea about architecture and modern engineering skills were employed to build a new and modern city. In 1903, the modern part of Hanoi was struck by bubonic plague. So in 1903, the modern part of Hanoi was struck by bubonic plague. In many colonial countries. So, in many colonial countries, measures to control the spread of disease created serious social conflicts. But in Hanoi, events took a peculiarly interesting turn. The French part of Hanoi was built as a beautiful and clean city with wide avenues and a well laid out sewer system. So the French part of Hanoi was built as a beautiful, clean city with wide avenues and a well laid out sewer system, while the native so while the native quarters was not provided with any modern facilities. Here's a figure. Figure 7. Modern Hanoi. Colonial buildings like this one came up in the French part of Hanoi. The refuse from the old city. Okay, so the refuse from the old city drained straight out into the river, or during heavy rains or floods overflowed into the streets. Thus, what was installed to create a hygienic environment in the French city became the cause of the plague. The large sewers in the modern part of the city, a symbol of modernity, were an ideal and protected breeding ground for rats. The sewers also served as a great transport system, allowing the rats to move around the city without any problem, and rats began to enter the well cared for homes of the French through the sewage pipes. What was to be done? 3.2 The Rat Hunt. To stem this invasion, a rat hunt was started in 1902. So, a rat hunt was started in 1902. The French hired Vietnamese workers and paid them for each rat they caught. Rats began to be caught in thousands. On 30th May, for instance, 20,000 were caught, but still there seemed to be no end. For the Vietnamese, the Red Hunt seemed to provide an early lesson in the success of collective bargaining. Those who did the dirty work of entering sewers found that if they came together, they could negotiate a higher bounty. They also discovered innovative ways to profit from this situation. The bounty was paid when a tail was given as proof that a rat had been killed. So the rat catchers took to just clipping the tails and releasing the rats. Okay, so what they did was that the bounty was paid when a tail was given as proof that a rat had been killed. So the rat catchers, so they became clever. So they took to just clipping the tails and releasing the rats so that the process could be repeated over and over again. Some people, in fact, began raising rats to earn a bounty. Defeated by the resistance of the weak, the French were forced to scrap the bounty program. None of this prevented the Bubonic Plague, which swept through the area in 1903 and in subsequent years. In a way, the Red Menace marks the limits of French power and the contradictions in their civilizing mission. And the actions of the red catchers tell us of the numerous small ways in which colonialism was fought in everyday life. 4. Religion and Anti-Colonialism. Colonial domination was exercised by control over all areas of private and public life. Colonial domination was exercised by control over all areas of private and public life. The French occupied Vietnam militarily, but they also sought to reshape social and cultural life. While religion played an important role in strengthening colonial control, it also provided ways of resistance. Let us consider how these happened. Vietnam's religious beliefs were a mixture of Buddhism. So, Vietnam's religious beliefs were a mixture of Buddhism, Confucianism, and local practices. Christianity, introduced by French missionaries, was intolerant of this easygoing attitude and viewed the Vietnamese tendency to revere the supernatural as something to be corrected. Christianity, introduced by French missionaries, was intolerant of this easygoing attitude and viewed the Vietnamese tendency to revere the supernatural as something to be corrected. From the 18th century, many religious movements were hostile to the Western presence. An early movement against French control and the spread of Christianity was the Scholars' Revolt in 1868. So there was a revolt, a movement against French control and the spread of Christianity, and the name of the movement is called Scholars' Revolt in 1868. This revolt was led by officials and the imperial court, angered by the spread of Catholicism. They were angered by the spread of Catholicism and French power. They led a general uprising in Nguyen and Ha Tien provinces where over 1,000 Catholics were killed. So what happened is that they led a general uprising in Nguyen and Ha Tien. So they led an uprising in Nguyen and Ha Tien provinces where over 1,000 Catholics were killed. Here we have a box. Box 1. Confucius, 551 to 479 BCE, a Chinese thinker, developed a philosophical system based on good conduct, practical wisdom, and proper social relationships. People were taught to respect their parents and submit to elders. They were told that the relationship between the ruler and the people was the same as that between children and parents. Here's a figure. Figure 8. The execution of Father Bori, a Catholic missionary. Images like this by French artists were publicized in France to stir up religious fury. Catholic missionaries had been active in winning converts since the early 17th century, and by the middle of the 18th century had converted some 300,000. The French crushed the movement, but this uprising served to inspire other patriots to rise up against them. So this uprising, it inspired other patriots to rise up against them. The elites in Vietnam were educated in Chinese and Confucianism. Okay, so the elites, they were educated in Chinese and Confucianism, but religious beliefs among the peasantry were shaped by a variety of syncretic traditions that combined Buddhism and local beliefs. Okay, as for the peasantry, their religious beliefs were shaped by a variety of syncretic traditions that combined Buddhism and local beliefs. So, what is this syncretism or syncretic? Syncretic, characterized by syncretism, aims to bring together different beliefs and practices, seeing their essential unity rather than their difference. So it aims to bring together different beliefs and practices, seeing their essential unity rather than their differences. There were many popular religions in Vietnam that were spread by people who claimed to have seen a vision of God. Some of these religious movements supported the French, but others inspired movements against colonial rule. One such movement was the Hoa Hao. It began in 1939 and gained great popularity in the fertile Mekong Delta area. So, one such movement is called Hoa Hao. It began in 1939 and gained great popularity in the fertile Mekong Delta area. It drew on religious ideas popular in anti-French uprisings of the 19th century. The founder of Hoa Hao was a man called Hung Pu So. Okay. The founder of Hoa Hao was a man called Hun Pu So. He performed miracles and helped the poor. So he performed miracles and helped the poor. His criticism against useless expenditure had a wide appeal. He also opposed the sale of child brides, gambling, and the use of alcohol and opium. The French tried to suppress the movement inspired by Huan Fuso. So the French tried to suppress the movement inspired by Huan Fuso. They declared him mad. Okay. So the French, they declared him mad, called him the Mad Bronze, and put him in a mental asylum. Interestingly, the doctor who had to prove him insane became his follower. Okay. So, what happened was that the doctor who had to prove him insane became his follower, and finally, in 1941, even the French doctors declared that he was sane. The French authorities exiled him to Laos and sent many of his followers to concentration camps. So, what are these concentration camps? A prison where people are detained without due process of law. The word evokes an image of a place of torture and brutal treatment. So his followers were sent to concentration camps. Movements like this always had a contradictory relationship with mainstream nationalism. Political parties often drew upon their support but were uneasy about their activities. They could neither control or discipline these groups, nor support their rituals and practices. Yet the significance of these movements in arousing anti imperialist sentiments should not be underestimated. 5. The vision of modernization. French colonialism was resisted at many levels and in various forms, but all nationalists had to grapple with one set of questions. What was it to be modern? What was it to be nationalist? In order to be modern, what was it necessary to regard tradition as backward and reject all earlier ideas and social practices? So, in order to be modern, was it necessary to regard tradition as backward and reject all earlier ideas and social practices? Was it necessary to consider the West as the symbol of development and civilization and try and copy the West? Different answers were offered to such questions. Some intellectuals felt that Vietnamese traditions had to be strengthened to resist the domination of the West, while others felt that Vietnam had to learn from the West even while opposing foreign domination. So there were different answers. So the first opinion was that Vietnamese traditions had to be strengthened to resist the domination of the West. And another opinion is that Vietnam had to learn from the West. So Vietnam had to learn from the West even while opposing foreign domination. These differing visions led to complex debates which could not be easily resolved. In the late 19th century, resistance to French domination was very often led by Confucian scholar activists who saw their world crumbling. Educated in the Confucian tradition, Fan Boi Chao, 1867 to 1940. So, educated in the Confucian tradition, Fan Boi Chao, 1867 to 1940, was one such nationalist. He became a major figure in the anti-colonial resistance from the time he formed the Revolutionary Society. So he formed the Revolutionary Society. Doi Tan Hoi in 1903 with Prince Quang De as the head. So Prince Quang De is the head. So let's see here. Source A. In Japan, Fan Boi Chao and Fan Chu Trin spent time together discussing their visions of Vietnamese independence and debating their differences. This is what Fan Boi Chao later wrote about their discussions. Thereafter, over more than 10 days, he and I debated time and again, and our opinions were diametrically opposed. That is to say, he wished to overthrow the monarchy in order to create a basis for the promotion of popular rights. I, on the contrary, maintained that first the foreign enemy should be driven out, and after our nation's independence was restored, we could talk about other things. My plan was to make use of the monarchy, which he opposed absolutely. His plan was to raise up the people to abolish the monarchy, with which I absolutely disagreed. In other words, he and I were pursuing one and the same goal, but our means were considerably different. Fan Boi Chao. So, Fan Boi Chao met the Chinese reformer Liang Qichao. So, Fan Boi Chao met the Chinese reformer Liang Qichao 1873 to 1929 in Yokohama in 1905. Fan's most influential book, The History of the Laws of Vietnam, was written under the strong influence and advice of Qichao. It became a widely read bestseller. So this book, The History of the Laws of Vietnam, it became a bestseller in Vietnam and China and was even made into a play. The book focuses on two connected themes: the loss of sovereignty and the severing of ties with China, ties that bound the elites of the two countries within a shared culture. It is this double loss that Fan laments, a lament that was typical of reformers from within the traditional elite. Other nationalists strongly differed with Fan Boi Chao. One such was Fan Chu Trinh. So another revolutionist or nationalist was Fan Chu Trinh, 1871 to 1926. He was intensely hostile to the monarchy and opposed to the idea of resisting the French with the help of the court. His desire was to establish a democratic republic. Profoundly influenced by the democratic ideas of the West, he did not want a wholesale rejection of Western civilization. He accepted the French revolutionary ideal of liberty but charged the French for not abiding by the ideal. He demanded that the French set up legal and educational institutions and develop agriculture and industries. Okay, so what did Fan Boi Chao want? He wants to first send away or to drive away the foreign people or the foreign masters, that is the French people. And for Fan Chu Trinh, what he wanted was to establish a democratic republic for Vietnam. Okay, so here's a new word: republic. A form of government based on popular consent and popular representation. It is based on the power of the people as opposed to monarchy. So, what is this republic? It's a form of government based on popular consent and popular representation. It is based on the power of the people as opposed to monarchy. 5.1 Other Ways of Becoming Modern: Japan and China. Early Vietnamese nationalists had a close relationship with China and Japan. So they had close relationship with Japan and China. They provided models for those looking to change, a refuge for those who were escaping French police, and a location where a wider Asian network of revolutionaries could be established. In the first decade of the 20th century, a Go East movement became popular. So, Go East movement became popular. In 1907 to '08, some 300 Vietnamese students went to Japan to acquire modern education. So 300 Vietnamese students went to Japan to acquire modern education. For many of them, the primary objective was to drive out. So they want to drive out French from Vietnam, overthrow the puppet emperor and re-establish. So they want a monarchy again. So they want to re-establish the Nguyen dynasty that had been deposed by the French. So those people or those students who went to Japan, what their motive was that they want to drive out the French from Vietnam and overthrow the puppet emperor and re-establish the Nguyen dynasty that had been deposed by the French. These nationalists looked for foreign arms and help. They appealed to the Japanese as fellow Asians. Japan had modernized itself and had resisted colonization by the West. Besides, its victory over Russia in 1907 proved its military capabilities. Vietnamese students escaped a branch of the Restoration Society in Vietnam. Okay, Vietnamese students established. So the Vietnamese students established a branch of the Restoration Society. So they established a branch of the Restoration Society in Tokyo, but after 1908, the Japanese Ministry of Interior clamped down on them. Many, including Phan Boi Chau, were deported. So Phan Boi Chau was deported and forced to seek exile in China and Thailand. Developments in China also inspired Vietnamese nationalists. In 1911, the long established monarchy in China was overthrown by a popular movement under Sun Yat-sen. So, Sun Yat-sen, and a republic was set up. So in 1911, the long established monarchy in China was overthrown by a popular movement under Sun Yat-sen and a republic was set up. Inspired by these developments, Vietnamese students organized the Association for the Restoration of Vietnam, or Vietnam Quan Phuc Hoi. So Vietnam Quan Phuc Hoi. Now the nature of the anti-French independence movement changed. Okay, so the nature of the anti-French independence movement changed. The objective was no longer to set up a constitutional monarchy but a democratic republic. So earlier they want to re-establish the monarchy, but now their objectives changed. It is to set up a constitutional monarchy. Okay, it is not to set up a constitutional monarchy but a democratic republic. So they want democratic republic now. Figure 9. Cartoon of Vietnamese nationalist chasing away imperialist. In all such cartoonist representations of struggle, the nationalists appear heroic, marching ahead while the imperial forces flee. Soon, however, the anti-imperialist movement in Vietnam came under a new type of leadership. The communist movement and Vietnamese nationalism. So the Great Depression of the 1930s had a profound impact on Vietnam. The prices of rubber and rice fell, leading to rising rural debts, unemployment, and rural uprisings, such as in the provinces of Nahe An and Ha Tin. So the prices of rubber and rice fell, leading to rising rural debts, unemployment, and rural uprising, such as in the provinces of Ne An, so Ne An and Hatin. Nean and Hattin. These provinces were among the poorest, so they were among the poorest, had an old radical tradition, and have been called the electrical fuses of Vietnam. When the system was under pressure, they were the first to blow. The French put these uprisings down with great severity, even using planes to bomb demonstrators. So they even used planes to bomb on the demonstrators. In February 1930, Ho Chi Minh brought together competing. So, in February 1930, Ho Chi Minh brought together competing nationalist groups to establish the Vietnamese Communist Vietnam Cong San Dang Party. So they established the Vietnamese Communist Party, later renamed the Indo-Chinese Communist Party. He was inspired by the militant demonstrations of the European Communist parties. In 1940, Japan occupied Vietnam. So what happened was that in 1940, Japan occupied Vietnam as part of its imperial drive to control Southeast Asia. So nationalists now had to fight against the Japanese as well as the French. So the Vietnamese nationalists, they had to fight against the Japanese as well as French. The League for the Independence of Vietnam. So the League for the Independence of Vietnam, which came to be known as the Viet Minh. So they came to be called as Viet Minh, fought the Japanese occupation and recaptured Hanoi in September 1945. The Democratic Republic of Vietnam was formed and Ho Chi Minh became chairman. So that's all, guys. See you in my next video. Bye.